broader thing that I'm trying to focus on is the way that we work is changing. And when the way we work changes, almost everything else changes around it, right? So the book is really focused on what do leaders in all contexts need to know? What do leaders need to think about when it comes to how it's going to shape their work and their workforce? We keep hearing this rhetoric as like AI is taking people's jobs, and that's not really true. And this is the thing that I was like most concerned with, and that we need to begin to wrestle with, is that when that way of working changes, it's not just getting the same outcome but different, or even getting the same outcome just faster. Something goes on in us as workers that also changes, right? So what the wisdom gap is, it's not just about having the knowledge, it's about having the wisdom to know what to do with it that is the thing that really matters. So this is where I think it's an identity shift. And it's a shift in our identity and what it means to be the worker in this scenario. It's also a leadership identity shift as well as what it means to lead people in this context. It is a real challenge because so much of our identity has been caught up in our work. But I think as believers in particular, we have a difference between identity and calling, and trying to begin to see the difference between those two things is the important thing. Is that our identity is in Christ, our calling is whatever he asks us to do. And so AI is going to definitely change the what we do. It doesn't remove the why you do it. And the why you do it is the bit that we care about the most, because it's the thing that's most tied to our identity and it's most tied to our sense of purpose.
This episode is brought to you by Glue. As AI continues to reshape how organizations engage, communicate, and serve people, Glue is helping the faith and flourishing ecosystem build technology with both innovation and trust in mind. Through Glue AI Studio, mission-driven builders can access production-grade AI infrastructure designed to support values-aligned innovation, including multi-model access, observability tools, and infrastructure built for real ministry and human-centered applications. From ministry assistance to language tools and donor engagement systems, organizations are already building AI solutions that support people, not just productivity. To learn more or start building with Glue AI Studio, visit studio.ai.glue.com. That's studio.ai.glue.com. And thanks again to Glue for supporting this podcast and the broader missional AI movement.
Hi, welcome to the Global Missional AI Podcast, where faith meets technology and we explore how innovation can serve the kingdom of God. I'm Joshua Seal, and I serve as the Executive Director of Global Missional AI. Here's the line you've probably heard 100 times. AI is taking our jobs. But what if that's the wrong way to see it? What if AI isn't taking your job, it's taking pieces of it, and quietly handing you the chance to do work that you were actually called to do? Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're turning the tables on one of our own. James Poulter, or JP, is a voice that many of you know well from this community and from this podcast. An innovation strategist, a futurist, and someone who spent years helping leaders make sense of where all this is heading. This time, though, James is in the guest seat, sitting down with Josiah to talk about what he's been building. Because this August, James is releasing his first book, AI at Work, and it tackles many questions every leader is wrestling with right now. When the very nature of work is changing, what do we actually do about it? In this conversation, James unpacks his idea of the full stack organization, why the future belongs to creative generalists rather than specialists, and why bringing AI into your work is less like fixing one wire at a time and more like rewiring the whole house at once. He and Josiah get into agentic AI as digital employees, the difference between traveling by bicycle, car, and airplane, and most importantly, the difference between your identity and your calling when the ground beneath work is shifting. It's a conversation you won't want to miss. It's a fascinating conversation about what it means to work and live in this age. Also, AI at Work is available for pre-order at Amazon or any other place you buy books. One more thing before we start. If this is the kind of conversation that lights you up, we'd love to see you in person. Missional AI is coming to London on July 15th at Plasters Hall, a day to gather with leaders thinking deeply about faith and the future of technology. Head to our website, missional.ai, to register. Now let's dive in with James and Josiah.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to be here with you, JP. And today you are about to release, just in a few months, your first book of all time. You have a lot of, so just for people who don't know, like JP has a reputation within the missional AI community of being someone who is an reputations are kind of a two-edged sword, but in this case, mostly positive.
Okay.
But for years, you have been pioneering lots of creative ideas within AI and actually kind of helping give people like a framework for how they can interpret the future of like what should they invest into as far as the AI skills they should learn, the things that in their business or ministry they should pay attention to and what they should not pay attention to. And you're finally taking some of that information and presenting it actually in a mainstream book. So like in a form that will be accessible to a lot of people. So I think that's probably where maybe we can start. So give me some background. Why did you decide to write a book? What's kind of the gist of this project?
Yeah, I mean, writing a book about AI probably seems a bit like a fool's errand, to be honest, because by the time you finish writing anything, it's out of date almost immediately. I mean, that's true of most nonfiction books, but particularly in this topic, it's really tricky. But I suppose what I wanted to do was to capture some of what I've been sharing in forums, both here at Missional and in other spaces where I get to speak over the past couple of years, and try and distill that down into something that by this point in August of 2026, when the book comes out, it's called AI at Work.
He's selling merch. He's not selling merch, but he does have merch.
These shirts will be available, I'm sure, at some point. That by this point, we are past the point of the early adopters that have been coming to events like this, have heard this message, right? Like people have been coming to these types of things, that they've seen this coming. But we have to always remember that is a tiny bubble within a bubble.
So you're saying like right now we are currently at the Missional AI Summit, and so you have from all over the world Christians and faith leaders who have kind of a stake in AI are all here learning from each other, doing kind of pioneering new ideas. But now you're kind of saying not everybody is coming to this event. Not everybody knows these things. So how can I actually reach a broader audience and help people know the stuff that we talk about at this?
Exactly. And in the intervening kind of year or so since I started working on the book, and like I say, it'll come out in the summertime, the world is continuing to shift. And not just in terms of models and tools and agents and all of that stuff. Of course, that's happening. But really what's the broader thing that I'm trying to focus on is the way that we work is changing. And when the way we work changes, almost everything else changes around it, right? Because we saw, even just during COVID, suddenly you go into lockdown, everyone moves onto Zoom, video conferencing goes from being something that a very small amount of people use to something that everybody uses. And I think AI is doing the same thing, but in just a much broader context. And we have to now begin to wrestle with the changing way that we do the work, not just whether it's vibe coding or development or technical work. It's coming to affect everything.
So give me like the elevator pitch for AI at work, because when we're talking about the topic of AI at work, there are probably millions of things you could have written about.
Yeah.
So what is like the specific problem that you're trying to solve in the world with this project?
So the book is really focused on what do leaders in all contexts need to know, whether you're leading a nonprofit, whether you're leading a church organization, whether you're leading a business, large or small. What do leaders need to think about when it comes to how it's going to shape their work and their workforce? And I talk about this idea of building what I call a full stack organization. And a full stack organization is a company that recognizes that every individual inside of it no longer does one part of the stack of work. And this is, I think, where people often get the narrative wrong around what's happening with AI and jobs in particular.
Yeah.
We keep hearing this rhetoric as like AI is taking people's jobs. And that's not really true. AI is taking jobs in the truest sense, is that a job is a bit of the work that you do, right? If your entire role, however, is a single job, then yeah, sure, it's taking jobs. So if in a call center, all your job is to answer the phone and to read off a script.
Being taken by AI,
yeah, and then in that case, maybe that whole role is going to go away. But for most of us, in almost all forms of work, our role is made up of many jobs. And what the idea of a full stack organization is that it's an organization made up of full stack professionals, people that do all of the different parts of the work rather than just one slice. And the thing that we're seeing this particularly affecting most is the youngest people, those earliest in their careers. Because for the longest time, when you or I first took on our first ever job, you were probably being given a job. You weren't being given a role. You were being given some tasks to do that were often repetitive or, things that you would do easily or by rote. You would just learn them and do a process. Now, sure, AI is going to come for those things, and we're already beginning to see that. But what we want to do is to move in the direction of building people that can not only do those individual jobs, but they get exposure to the whole career path that they want to kind of step into in the future. And that's what building a full stack organization is about building up those people so that they can do more of the work stack in one go from the earliest stage.
So here's a question that I've had about this topic, because when I think about like job loss because of automation and AI and stuff like that, I've realized that in most industries, it's going to look like actually just a changing of forms of that job. So let me roll back for a second. So I'm a software developer. I studied at Georgia Tech. When people studied software development back in the day, it was punch cards. Like in the 70s, you learned how to create holes in a sheet that you would feed into a massive machine and it would do something interesting, right? Yeah. And you'd actually be able to get work from it. The people who were doing that as machines began to change as things got different. Those jobs went away, but the skill set didn't necessarily go away. There was underlying principles where people were able to remove a lot of the grunt work and the things that they actually don't really want to be doing anyways, and go into another level of abstraction, right? And so we went from binary to assembly code to programming languages, and now we suddenly have AI programming, right? So it's another layer of abstraction. So I'm curious if you know examples or maybe even speculative examples where you could see this happening of a way that certain industries are going to actually generate new jobs that are just different jobs than the ones that we are currently seeing as AI takes away the more grunt work pieces that people are not actually that interested in doing. So like, do you have some concrete examples of that?
We're already beginning to see it happen, but I think maybe what's more important, first of all, is to understand those same first principles that you just outlined, right? Yeah. So the way that coding has moved is those layers of abstraction kind of getting broader.
Just to mention something here, one of my software developer teachers when I was in community college, her first job was programming in binary, and she literally just tapped ones and zeros. That was her job, I think, for the government, just like programming ones and zeros. And you could say, like, if that job went away, like, oh, that's you're losing jobs. That's automation taking away jobs. But it's like, who wants to do that?
Well, yeah, it's not great work.
No, it's terrible work. And so much of the stuff that we think is great work actually probably might not be that great.
It might not be that great. And it's also not really existed for that long in the sweep of human history either. So I'm not that upset. Like, if TikTok editors suddenly are out of a job, it's like, it's not the worst thing in the world.
It's not the end of the world. Okay, so you were mentioning kind of this transition of different levels of abstraction. So take me down that journey.
So the abstraction is happening already, right? So for most knowledge workers, and this does more directly apply to people whose job involves the computer in some way, we have been spending a lot of our time learning how to manipulate software to get an outcome.
Yeah.
And now the abstraction is beginning to happen, which is that rather than manipulating the software, you are talking to an AI that manipulates the software. And very soon, you might be talking to an AI that talks to many AIs that manipulates many different softwares. So it's that same abstraction that you're beginning to see in going from binary to linear code to programming languages to kind of apps and kind of IDEs and things like that. That same abstraction is happening. The challenge is that how does it change the way that you work when that abstraction happens? So this idea of vibe coding, right, is something that we've seen evolve over the past 18 months or so, which
now I want to mention. Last year, I remember I was here at Missional AI, and my roommates at the Airbnb that I was staying at were all vibe coding for the first time and having a ton of fun with it. But now you look 1 year later, of all the different predictions that could have happened, that I feel like has really blown up in a really surprising way, where it looks like 100%. Most of the AI industry and money behind a lot of stuff is actually coming from AI assisted programming.
Yeah,
it's been a massive change.
And not just in the new things, but also completely transforming the way that the old world was also being done as well. And this is the thing that I was most concerned with, and that we need to begin to wrestle with, is that when that way of working changes, it's not just the getting the same outcome but different, or even getting the same outcome just faster, something goes on in us as workers that also changes, right? So one of the things that I've experienced, and I know that this is true of many people that have dived deep into the agentic way of kind of doing things, is that you begin to move at a different speed. Okay, when you move at a different speed, your experience of that movement is also different. And let me kind of give you an analogy of what this is like. It's like getting from point A to point B on a bicycle is not the same thing as getting point A to point B in a car, right? Why is it different? Well, okay, in the car, you can have a different experience, right? One is you can go with other people, right? So then your journey with those people becomes a different experience than going on your own on the bike. But it's different again of when you get on the airplane to go on that place, because you're the one who's no longer, hopefully in most cases not flying the airplane, right? Which means you can get other stuff done, and that journey maybe becomes more leisurely or more productive. But that even is different than going on a cruise ship, which is like, kind of a whole experience in and of itself, right? That the journey is the experience. The same thing is happening in our working lives, which is that when we go from being the person who has to have, like the bicycle, hands physically on the tiller of like making sure that the pedals are moving and you're physically exerting yourself, to the car, which you might say is, okay, I've gone from doing all the work myself, maybe it was the typewriter of old, to the computer of now. Well, something happened there, right? It's like it's less physically exhausting to use the thing. That's one big change. Now it's becoming less cognitively exhausting as well, right? Yes. Which is the difference between going from the car to the airplane. You're still going from one place to another.
So you're making a comment about like industrial revolution. Yeah. Obviously, everything was physically exhausting. People are working really hard with their hands. They're working in factories. And then we have this massive shift where everyone's sitting behind a desk and they're working on a computer. They're doing spreadsheets. They're doing, who knows, like things that we are all very familiar with. Yeah. You're saying we're going to see another shift where we move from things that are mentally taxing, mentally exhausting, into a whole different space that might even be a little hard for us to understand.
Yeah, and it might be that it becomes either, like with the flight or the cruise ship, either more entertaining, it might become more social, it might become, I don't know what, kind of a whole new experience of what it means to kind of get things done. One of the challenges is that when you take away, though, the agency of the person doing the work, is that it also takes away potentially their relationship with it in terms of their purpose. Yeah. And that's one of the big downsides of this, is that we have to think about, is that, both it gets, much easier, that's nice. But also when it gets easier, then your relationship with it also changes. Your relationship to that work, both in terms of how much value you place on it, and also how much value you place on yourself as the person that was able to deliver that work, changes too. So this is just one of the side effects around value and purpose that we're beginning to kind of wrestle with. But also speed is an interesting kind of dynamic, right? And we're seeing this in organizations now, that there are organizations where pockets of teams have adopted AI tools, most notably in software development and in programming. Yeah. And they're finding that they're working alongside colleagues who haven't necessarily adopted those tools. And so what happens when you've got, kind of two people, kind of in the same vehicle, one traveling at one speed and one traveling at the other one? Like it's going to be friction, right? It's going to be painful in some cases. And so this comes back to that thing around the full stack, is that we have to start like taking the work that we do in totality now. We had another team on the podcast earlier this week talking about, kind of the breakdown between the UI and the UX people and the developers. They're now kind of just treating a problem as a problem rather than as a UI problem or UX problem or a code problem.
So that's actually a really good example for the thing that you're talking about with abstraction, whereas normally you have a specific person who is doing the job of user experience, and that's their whole job, is just making different the specific frames and buttons of an app, and actually walking through how a person will experience that app. And then you have someone who's making the actual art of it, the graphic design, and those are two very distinct roles. One's working more with people, one's working more with kind of art principles, and then you have a programmer that's connecting it all together. You're saying right now, when AI abstracts away all of those three jobs, because those are very easy jobs to be abstracted away by AI, because they're very data-driven. Yeah. Suddenly you have new roles, maybe community roles. It might not be a single person that's directing something. You may have a community of people directing an AI to solve just the problem at a high level.
Yeah, or in many cases that those individual roles get abstracted away to the person themselves. And so it's, I think that the future looks like a lot more creative generalists rather than individual creative specialists, because the specialism, you can never be a better specialist than an AI on any topic if it's knowledge-based. You can read whatever time you have available, kind of around a topic area, and you'll have read a portion of the matter that's available. In most cases, particularly when it comes to knowledge work, AI has read all of it. Yeah. And it's way better at recalling it than you can ever physically be. And so what goes on there is that you can't be a specialist, but what the wisdom gap is, and it talks about the Centre for Humane Technology talk about this idea of the wisdom gap, is it's not just about having the knowledge, it's about having the wisdom to know what to do with it that is the thing that really matters. And that's part of that upper stack of work that we need to train people up in, that they need to know how to go from being a great creative kind of specialist to being able to implement wisdom and deploy wisdom at a scale that previously was not possible in order for them to become a more creative generalist.
Man, so I'm having a funny memory of when I was in college, and I went to the fourth story of the library, and I found this fantastic book that said how to survive the Y2K crisis using COBOL coding.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I was just like, this is the best title I've ever read of a book, where like everything about this title was for a specific year, for a specific time.
Yes. As
you're approaching this new project, AI at work, and you're trying to actually look into the future and see how AI is going to influence all of our jobs and just our very experience of doing work, how have you been? What have you done to try to like approach it from a more long-term perspective that isn't just like something just for the zeitgeist right in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are going through a specific moment in time, so we shouldn't ignore that, right? This transition is only going to happen once, and so there are some specific nuances around it that we should be aware of. One in particular is that we are setting the precedent of how this work is going to get done in the future, particularly in those that are working on the models themselves. But for most people, that's not their daily experience. And so we do kind of have to learn and iterate a little bit as we go and kind of be agile about it. The thing that I suppose I'm trying to kind of say to most people is that this is not like rewiring your house one cable at a time. This is like ripping out all of the wiring in one go, and you kind of have to approach it like rewiring a house all in one go.
Okay, so dig more into that. Like, help me understand that. That's really interesting.
So if you I had this mouse that was very determined in our old house to chew through the wiring one cable at a time every couple of weeks, and I became very good friends with Frank, our electrical engineer, who would come back once a fortnight to change this one thing at a time. The point is that you can try and kind of bring AI into your organization with that method, right? Which is we'll go team by team, process by process, organizational unit by organizational unit. And the challenge is it's going to be very painful, because every time that you change one process, obviously it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It affects the rest of the circuitry throughout the organization. I talk about it in the book, this idea of AI being a bit like our central nervous system, is that you kind of are treating this like a full reboot, really, because we actually need everyone inside of the organization to work as if they've got a whole new brain that they're connected to. And that's, we don't do brain transplants. We've not got that far yet in science fiction, into science fact. But the reason that we don't do whole brain transplants is because, everything goes out the window with it, right? Yeah. That's kind of the problem. But the way that AI is transforming how people work now is a lot more like that, because when you have like different parts of the organization moving at different speeds, it's really painful. And so what we have to try and do is begin to retrain everybody from the ground up. And we can talk more about kind of how you go about doing that. But the challenge that I think most organizations are facing right now is that innovation has been happening kind of in pockets with those who are most likely to kind of lean in with the earliest of adopters. And what we actually need to do is take this as a leadership issue and start, starting from the head down, and treat it like a whole new way of doing things, a whole new nervous system. Because when you do that, then you see that actually everyone begins to move at the same speed.
So could you actually help me work backwards here for a second? Yeah. I want to ask two questions. The first one is, I want you to actually kind of put on your prescience hat, prophetic hat, and actually try to imagine forward in the future what just like a normal, like 5-person small business might look like that is, living in a world where AI is heavily influencing work. And then I want you to work backwards and say, for people who are currently in the position of trying to, squash bugs as they pop up and fix the broken wires using AI, one by one, instead of actually gutting everything and kind of rebuilding from the ground up? What does it look like to build towards where you think things are going practically, so people can begin to invest in that? But first, I think just even for my own understanding, I want a glimpse into the future of what it might look like in just kind of a small nonprofit, small firm, for people to be doing this kind of collaborating with AI and exploring this, humans taking more of a generalist role, a management role, a higher level role, where the abstraction has moved up one level.
Yeah. So I think as we roll into the rest of this year and into 2027, we are going to see these agentic capabilities of these models become even more capable than they already are.
Just where they're able to function on their own and actually get real work done.
I often say that we've moved from conversational AI, which is where you talk to the AI and then you go doing the work, to you talk to the AI now and it goes and does the work. Like that is the agentic kind of way of doing things.
Claude and OpenClaw and a lot of the different, lot of that stuff.
Any of those harnesses that can manage these different models. But rather than you thinking about them as question answer engines, we are now thinking of them as task engines, that you are asking them to do things and they can actually do those things. That is a completely different way of doing stuff, right? Because you are essentially setting up virtual employees or digital employees inside the business. So you ask the question of, okay, for a 5-person team from now to next year, is that 5-person team may still be a 5-person team in a year's time, but they may be doing 10 times the output. That, for most people, doesn't compute because they can't imagine themselves doing 10 times the output.
Exactly. But it's, the potential is there.
Yeah.
Like it's honestly there.
And it's hard to imagine until you start breaking down, well, what is the friction that you currently face in your business today? And most of the friction that you face is people.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it makes more sense. Not because people are difficult, but because we are all inherently, kind of moving through time and space, limited by our physical conditions, right? Like people have to stop and eat and sleep and drink and look after children and educate themselves and take some time to watch Netflix and like all of the other stuff, right? And go grocery shopping and do laundry, right? Like those things
take sick days.
Yeah, take sick days. And that is all good stuff because that's actually what makes a whole human life, right? Yeah. But it does get in the way of like productivity. And productivity should certainly not be the end goal of everything. But like we are also called to be fruitful as people. And I think that there is a God-honoring way of handling that. But so for most of us, though, we can't imagine ourselves doing 10 times the amount of work until suddenly it's possible because you take out the friction. And so the friction might be, okay, I can have a thing that goes and does the work for me whilst I sleep and can go and do the work for me whilst I have lunch and go and do the work for me whilst I do these things. I think for people that have begun to experiment with things like OpenClaw or Claude Code or other agentic tools, and this is my own personal experience of having been playing around with these things pretty deeply for the past couple of months, is I'd say in my current consultancy, 3 Point, which is the brand I started at the start of this year, I'm probably doing about the same amount of work that I was doing at the same point in time when I started my last business, Vixen Labs, when I had 5 full-time employees. And it's just me. And that's my reality experience of like being able to output stuff. Why am I able to do that? Because I have an AI that makes the presentations. I have an AI that schedules the meetings. I have an AI that reads the emails and gives me a daily summary. I have an AI that does the project management. I used to have a person for each one of those things, right? And now I don't. And so I'm now moving at 10 times the speed that I was probably moving at the equivalent time period. At the moment, that's for me because I'm leaned in on this stuff and because I've got enough patience to burn through the friction.
And to be the hamster, to be the guinea pig.
And to be willing to be the guinea pig, and that's fine. Fast forward a year, I think the technology gets easy enough, onboarding gets easy enough, the quick start guides get easy enough, and the literature is easy enough.
It becomes more mainstream.
For more mainstream people, in the same way that everything has become more mainstream for most people. Even prompting and all those kind of tools that we've lived with over the past couple of years. So you're saying the
capabilities are already there right now for people to 1x to 2x, 3x, 4x or more their productivity, but it's actually right now it's almost more of a onboarding usability
100%
problem.
And like I've said this many times, I may have even said it on this show, sorry if I have, or from the stage here at Missional. I've had Excel on my desktop for 3 decades. I still don't know how to do a pivot table correctly, and I have no desire to learn, and I will never do so. But the point is that most of us use 5% of the capabilities of the technology we have today.
Yeah, it's true.
So this stuff doesn't have to get any smarter, faster, or better than it already is. We just have to use more of it, and that's been true basically for all of time, right? Like, most of us, if we took the time time element out. And it was like more like Neo in the Matrix, where he just kind of gets the information downloaded into him. And I'm dating myself both with this reference, and the Gen Z watchers won't have a clue what I'm talking about. But if you can just kind of like learn Kung Fu because someone like just pushed it into your brain, well, suddenly you've got the same capabilities, right? But with zero time effort. Okay, the output suddenly means that you can do Kung Fu today rather than in 3 years' time once you take the time to learn it, right? It's not that you weren't capable of learning Kung Fu before. Time was the barrier, right? And that's true of almost all of the work that we do. Is it's not that you're not capable of it. It just, the time takes, kind of up the space. So I think that's where we're heading to. So you asked the second part of the question was like, okay, well, how do we get from
how can people start investing in, so for people who do have businesses, ministries, teams, and they're trying to just be like, use Gemini more, like trying to figure out how AI fits in as more of an add-on, but not as a systemic kind of rehaul. Like how do people approach this?
So this is where I think it's an identity shift.
Okay.
And it's a shift in our thinking about our identity and what it means to be the worker in this scenario. It's also a leadership identity shift as well as what it means to lead people in this context. And I use this example as like if you came to me as someone who was like, I want to get fit, right? And all I did was give you a pass to the gym and said, okay, I'll see you in 6 weeks and see how you're getting on. Most people, when they do that on January 1st, by February 14th, they are no longer in the gym and they are no longer getting fit, right? Like, that's just the way it is. Because just giving you access to the thing is not enough,
is not the thing.
Right? If, however, you came to me on January 1st, I gave you access to the gym. I then gave you a tour of the gym. I showed you how all the equipment works. I then maybe like taught you the rules of how to operate in the gym, how to be a polite person in the gym, how to like do a deadlift without hurting yourself. And then maybe if I put you into a community of practice where once a week you went to a class with a bunch of other people who were also trying to get fit.
Usually the only people who actually stick it out are the people who have community.
Right. Then maybe, and I don't know exactly when, I don't know how long it might take, but as Simon Sinek often says, like, if I give you that, you will get fit. I don't know when that will happen, but it will happen at some point or other. And for most people, that's all they need. But also, most people do not end up at the gym to become a bodybuilder. They go to the gym to get fit, right? Now, for 20% of the cases, you're going to need to become a bodybuilder, which is that just learning how to use the regular tools that everyone has access to, even being onboarded to them, taught how to use them safely and make sure you show up every week, is not going to turn you into a bodybuilder. That is when there has to be a specialist group of people that really know how to use these things and build special things with them, like becoming a bodybuilder, right? And there will always be a group of people, probably the people that are watching this, probably the people that will, kind of get on a plane and spend a couple of $1,000s and fly to Silicon Valley for a week to come and talk about AI. You guys might become bodybuilders in the AI space. But for what we actually need for most people, for most of the economy to function in the new world, is for them to become fit, contributing members of society. And for that, we need to give them access. We need to give them education, we need to give them opportunities, and then we need to put them into communities of practice. And if you do that in your organization, no matter how big or small, you will get AI fit. How long it's going to take, I don't know. Your circumstances may vary.
So here's kind of an interesting parallel here to the work example is as like a songwriter, in the past, I have gone and done kind of like a traditional recording process where you spend months working with a producer, spend thousands of dollars, record, massive, dozens or hundreds of stems of different instruments, and you combine them together into a project. And more recently, I have been using AI-assisted flow. And the fascinating thing is if you actually show the end product to someone who doesn't know which one's AI and which one's not, they will often love the one that is AI assisted as much or more than the other one, which I did sometimes in 1/10 the time. The biggest barrier right now for musicians in this space, because there's a wild, massive opportunity there, is actually on stigma, where people feel like this is cheating, and so they don't do it. So I'm curious, from the business standpoint, I don't think the stigma would be people feeling like they're cheating, because business is all about cheating. Not in that way, but in trying to become more efficient, which in this case I'm calling cheating. But I feel like there probably is a bit of a stigma on the business side of not wanting to take away people's role, which traditionally was kind of the grunt work of just doing the spreadsheet, answering those emails. That is for, I don't know, the past however 30, 40, 50 years, that's been the standard way that we think about going to work and doing a job. So what do you think the process is like for people to to lose that stigma and begin to see this as a blessing and an opportunity instead of something that is taking away something that is good.
Well, and I think it is a real challenge because so much of our identity has been caught up in our work. But I think as believers in particular, we have a difference between identity and calling. And trying to begin to see the difference between those two things is the important thing, is that our identity is in Christ. Our calling is whatever he asks us to do. Those two things are not the same. But for the better parts, like you say, for the past 50 years, we have mixed and matched those words almost simultaneously.
The thing you do is the person you are.
Yeah, but that's not who God says you are. God says you are his, right? Your identity is in Christ. What he calls you to do is a different thing, and maybe what your ministry looks like is maybe even a different thing.
And it varies from time to time depending on what's happening in the world.
Yes. And so our callings change over time. Our identity does not. And this is where we have to reset some of this stuff, is that there's a difference between our purpose and our identity. Our purpose might shift over time. And work may be a part of that purpose. But ask anyone who's had taken time away from work to go and raise children, or taken time work because of illness, or to care for a loved one, or because of catastrophic industry, or whatever it might be. They all go through the same challenge of like, what is my purpose? And leave it long enough, they realize that purpose is not the same thing as their identity. And that's the thing that we also have to kind of really work into here, is that what it means to be a kind of living, working, playing human on the planet, and what we fill our time with is not the same thing as who we are. And trying to kind of build separation around those two things, I think, is really important. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that like obviously work is part of who we are, right? And part of our identity comes from the purpose that we call it. I'm just saying it's not the whole thing. Yeah. It's not the whole kit and caboodle. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, the way that we do the thing we do changes. Even the what we do changes. Does it have to change the why we do it? And so AI is going to definitely change the what we do, right? Because we already see that there are some roles that just make no sense for a human to do. And so for some people, that what is going to change. For most people, I think it's going to change the how. It's going to change the how you get things done, right? But it doesn't remove the why you do it. Right. And the why you do it is the bit that we care about the most, because it's the thing that's most tied to our identity, and it's most tied to our sense of purpose. And so what we really have to do is get to the bottom of, what is the why that you are about here? Why, and again, I referenced Cynic a minute ago, but like that, why I think that start with why question has resonated so well. Yeah. In the past 10 years or so since he did that TED Talk, is because that's what most of us are trying to work out. Why am I here doing this? Not what am I here doing this? And so, it's often, used phrase of we want to move from, kind of being human doing to human beings. It's that, we are trying to be here and do something rather than, do something.
Where it almost sounds like the shift is a little bit away from the skill set that we use to accomplish a larger task, and more moves towards the larger problem and the larger task that we're trying to actually fix. Yeah. I'm reminded of so I have a close friend who writes pulp fiction. Mm-hmm. That's his job, and he recently started using an AI assisted process to do that better, and has seen his output go up probably by a factor of 10, and his reviews are higher than they used to be, and his paycheck is much higher than it used to be, and it's been a bizarre shift for him because it's actually opened up all of these dreams in what he actually wants to do, which is change society through storytelling, and move people towards a Christian worldview. And now that he actually has all this throughput because of this AI process, what used to be he just had to kind of grind to be able to actually have a paycheck, suddenly he now has options and freedom and things that weren't even kind of on his plate before. But the thing that's been kind of weird for him and weird for kind of me to watch also is how few people are doing that. Yeah, it's just little pockets of people who are seeing the opportunity and jumping at it now. So I guess as we close right now, what's kind of like your last advice for AI at work, for people who are trying to assess like how they approach the integration of AI in their workspace? What should people be praying about, thinking about, investigating for over the next year?
I think the main thing that people need to take is that this is not something that is a one-time bring it in and fix it job. This is a shift that is going to take some time. It's not as simple as just buy people the tools and the job is done. If it was that simple, then I don't need to write a book about that, quite frankly. And we don't need a whole conference over 3 days here talking about it either. But what I do want people to think about is, work is one of the places where we spend most of our time, where it is tied to our identity and purpose, but it's not our whole identity and purpose. And it is the thing that we are, in many ways, kind of walking out the Great Commission by doing, and most of us in our work, whether we consider that to be a full-time ministry role, or that we are just doing ministry full-time in our roles. Whatever that looks like for you, we are all part of God's kind of plan to bring about the
original
kingdom.
Plan to subdue the earth and to take what God made good and make it better, and make things more beautiful.
Exactly. And kind of the first thing that kind of God does with Adam is give him a job to do, right? So like it is something that is clearly in the divine order and in part of the kind of creative way that things should be. So it's important that we kind of pay it due attention, and I think we do. But so that's why I started with work. It's why I think it's the most important thing, because if we can get work aligned, and particularly for those who are leading others in their work, then hopefully it can have a positive overspill effect into all other aspects of life, into the way that we lead our kids, into the way that we teach them, in the way in which we lead our churches, in the way that which we minister to the poor, and kind of bring about the kingdom. Like that's why I start there. But it's not the only place to focus. But if people would take that upon themselves and say, actually, me stewarding this right now is a really important part of setting about God's work and delivering on those kind of kingdom objectives, then I think it's going to have a massive overspill effect into all other parts of life. So that's why to focus there.
And so what I kind of hear is that right now there's a window of opportunity, because there's so much change that's happening and that's coming, but there's an opportunity to actually build new scaffolding that results in a huge productivity shift if we're able to actually dissociate our identity from the skill that we've gained into actually connecting identity a little bit more closely to the problem that we're trying to solve at a higher level. So based on that, I would say anyone who's interested in the idea of trying to imagine what would it be like for me at my job, not just to be obsessed with the how, but actually the what. What am I trying to accomplish? When does your book come out? When can people actually dig deeper into this thing and learn how they can approach this from a practical standpoint?
Yeah. Well, the book comes out in August 20th, being published in the US and in the UK. Pre-order's live now. You can go get it on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or wherever you get your books.
This is 2026, and I'm really excited for this project, and I can't wait to see how this also takes the knowledge that God has given you over so many years, JP, and takes them to the world. And I just hope that your next book has some sort of pun about poltergeist in it because of your last name.
We'll find someone. We'll find somewhere to put it in there.
Find somewhere to put it. All right. We'll slide in as an Easter egg. Well, I think that's all we got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining the Missional AI podcast, and check out AI at Work, sold wherever books are sold, coming in August of 2026. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Hey, did you know that we're coming to London? Coming up this summer, in July, Missional AI is going to be returning to the center of the city, where we are going to gather a global community for an exclusive opportunity, one day together with a bunch of contributors who are thinking about the intersection of faith, artificial intelligence, and what does it mean to live out God's calling in the world of technology. We would love to see you there. Find out more information at missional.ai.